Yeah, hi, Dr. Susan. We are live now. So, uh, thank you for accepting the invitation for Let's Talk. So, for the audience, let me tell the audience that Dr. Susan is a developmental pediatrician who worked at CMC Vellore previously, and now she's working in Esther City, right, Dr. Susan?
Astomed City. Yeah, that's a
Esther
good.
City. And she has specialized in management of developmental disorder in children, including attention deficit, hyperactive ADHD, autism, cerebral palsy, learning disability, intellectual disability, behavioral disorder, and genetics syndrome. So, Dr. Suven, this Let's Talk is a program which is an initiative for Awam we have started. Like here we discuss with parents, grandparents, siblings, and many more with professional also to aware about autism. So thank you so much, Dr. Susan, for accepting and here in this platform so audience can ask their questions also. So, Dr. Susan, we just want to ask here, like, what are the milestones that kids generally miss who were under the spectrum?
First, thank you, Monisha, for this invite. It's really an honor to be part of this. I'm very impressed by what you have been doing and you have done so far.
Thank you.
Being a parent, I know it is definitely not easy, and the highest form of self-actualization is when you reach out to other parents so that they are able to help go on their journey with their child in a beautiful way. And it is really remarkable with the amount of commitments and other things that you have, that you're able to set aside so much time for to educate
We are
parents.
not getting time. That's the main thing.
Yes, I know. And
We start.
in spite of your entirely busy schedule to be doing this and various other activities also, I say about the dance
Yeah.
classes and all that. It is really a hats
So,
off, Monisha, to you.
actually, as a parent, whatever we are doing after seeing our child, right?
Yes, yes,
So
definitely.
that's
Our children are like the biggest inspiration, and we learn from them. And yeah. Okay, so talking about the milestones that we miss. So one thing that I would like all parents out there to understand is that generally when we think, or when a layperson thinks of autism, they think more about the various behaviors that are associated with autism,
Mhm.
right? The stimming and the screaming, sometimes the unable to be in a normal place, and that is what generally people think about autism. But what we need to realize is that actually the earliest signs of autism are not the presence of things, but the absence of certain normal developmental milestones.
Certain development.
Okay, so like a child from the age of 6 weeks to 8 weeks, which is like within 2 months itself, should
Okay.
start looking at the mother's face.
Okay.
Whenever you call the child, whenever you talk to the child will look at your face as if like it is the most important thing in the world, which it is for a child at that age. So
Hmm.
that amount of eye contact actually comes within 2 months of age. Okay.
Okay. Within two
So
months. Okay.
yes, within 2 months it comes from for a majority of the children. If it's
Okay.
more than 3 months, we call it delayed social smile. So it is not just looking at the mother; it is also
Hmm.
smiling and that little bit of reciprocal sounds and all that the child makes.
Hmm.
So many children, when they don't do that at this time, parents say that, oh, it is because child is not paying attention,
Hmm.
child is not concentrating, he is looking at something else, and various other thought processes go along. But this is one of the earliest signs that your child may be having a problem. Okay.
Okay.
That doesn't mean
From
that the moment.
2 months, there might be the cases like uh, they should be aware of. Parents should.
Yes, yes, parents should be aware. If your child is not looking at you and smiling by 3 months of age, and this is not just a occasional smile, this is like a genuine smile, a happy smile on seeing
Hmm.
you. That is the first indication that so if you catch children that early, so we have seen children by 5 months of age and all, they have some of them have active eye contact avoidance. So you will try and look at the child will look somewhere else. You will go that side, the child will look here. It is all they avoid eye contact sometimes. So again, at that time, if we start intervening itself, they do really well. So that lack or the difficulty in connecting with the person, or the difficulty in eye contact and in the reciprocal social smile, so that is what actually is the first earliest milestone that shouldn't be missed. Then after that, you have like children as they grow up now, like within children, we all think children do not recognize their name, or rather they recognize what their name is only by around 1.5 2 years of age. But no, children as young as 9 months of age, when you call by their name, they will look, they should look. Okay, so within 1 year, if your child is not looking, not recognizing his or her name, I'm sure that you being a mother, you would have maybe seen that.
Now I am remembering all those things.
Sometimes when children, when you call their name, they will not respond. But the moment you associate something with it, like a chalky or tat, in Malayalam we say tata poam, we are going out. So at that time they will look. So that discrepancy is also a very, very early sign that we see. By around 9 months or so, they should be able to respond to their name consistently. It doesn't matter who is calling. Okay, they have that awareness that this is my name, even though they may not say it at that time. Then by 1 year, definitely pointing will start. So it can be at pictures, it can be at things, and whatever it is that they see, they will want to share. In the sense that they see something new, they will look at you and look at that thing to see whether, okay, is it safe to touch? Is it okay to go? So these are the very, very early signs that that all parents should be aware of, because it is not that if your child has delay in this, he definitely has autism. That is not what I'm saying. But these are early signs that say that, okay, something is wrong. We need to intervene more. Some of them may turn out to end up having ADHD rather than autism. But the early identification, whatever be the condition, definitely helps. So within 1 year itself, we can identify these features, and then it's only by 1.5. So again, parents come to me by 1 year of age saying that my child is looking at the fingers, or at 9 months of age. At 9 months of age, looking at fingers is normal. It is part of the normal development. Okay, so don't look for and obviously when a child is learning something, they will keep repeating it over and over and over again. So because my child is playing with cars the whole time, or looking very curiously at how the wheel is turning, doesn't mean that the child has autism. If the other things are normal. Are you understanding? So the first problem that they have is difficulty with social interaction, and that can be picked up by as young as 1 year of age. The other behaviors and all come, or rather are more important only if it crosses like 1.5 years of age. 1.5 to 2 years of age is when the repetitiveness and all that do we really pay attention to.
Okay, so what are the red flags that the parents need to be aware of?
Okay, so again, what I said right now, those definitely are the red flags.
Those are the red flags.
So, and apart for that, like at 1 year of age, again, child is not pointing at things, not asking for things. Again, there is this misconception that child is not paying attention. There can be an attention problem, yes, definitely. But if the child is not looking at things, not looking at what you have pointed to, if you show him either a picture in a book or something out, the child is not looking at that. Then children with autism, majority of them do have language delay, though language is not taken, or rather language is taken out of the diagnosis of autism now. We don't say a speech delay when we come to diagnosis of autism anymore. But majority of them do have language delay. So again, a child who is not saying meaningful words by around 1.5 2 years of age. Now, meaningful words means, now many of them may say ma, baba, or they may say the alphabets, and they may say the rhymes and all that, but not for communication purposes. So they will look at the wall and say amma, or look at or anything. They'll be playing by themselves and say amma, amma, but they will not call you.
Okay.
So that is another red flag for a child with autism, or rather to suspect autism. Then the other red flags are again child is preferring to be by himself in spite of people wanting to interact and play with them. Some sensory issues, like again, majority of children will have a fear of pressure cooker and mixie and all that in the beginning. But that is like persisting, it is not changing. Children again, they are over anxious, over having difficulty in strange places. Some of them may have these rituals, or these not rituals, it's just that they need that amount of constancy in their lives. So like a few children that I know, mother has to wear nightie inside the house. This is from as young as 2 years of age. They will not let, if the mother is inside the house, has to immediately change into a nightie or into the home dress. They get very upset when the mother is not wearing that at home.
But aren't this common with many kids like of this age group?
Yes. So again, if it is like persistent, if that it's the earlier autism used to be called a pervasive developmental disorder, in the sense that it is persistent and present at all situations, doesn't matter where. Okay, so when if those difficulties persist and are there in multiple settings, is when we think that they have autism. Then obviously the various behaviors that are very commonly associated, spinning themselves, flapping hands. Again, it is not just when they are excited, because children who are excited even at 2 years of age may get they don't know how to control themselves. So then they are holding the fist tight, or they can flap hands, they can jump around in order to show excitement. But if that social reciprocity is there, so again, I will go back to the red flag being social reciprocity. Everything else, in case social reciprocity is not there, also you can have these kind of rigid behaviors as part of other developmental disorders like OCD, or you can have sensory processing disorder per se. But social reciprocity, that is the number one criteria and the red flag that I would say to diagnose autism, or rather to suspect autism in young children especially.
Okay. So generally, speech delay is found in kids having autism. So
Yes.
how we will differentiate that? Okay, it may not be autism or something.
Okay, so now when you look at children with speech delay, even children who are deaf, they will have a speech delay,
Yeah.
right? That is because they are not hearing the words, they are not
Hearing.
able to speak it.
Yeah.
Now, children with who are deaf will try somehow or the other to communicate. They will start using a lot of gestures. They will use pointing. They will look at your face, try and get you to look at what they are looking. They may show and do. Some children with autism do point, but majority of them, what they do is they will pull you by the hand and try and put your hand as to what they want.
Yeah.
So it is kind of like using your hand like a tool. They are not looking at your face while they are doing it. If you show resistance also, they are not looking at you to ask, why aren't you doing this? That kind of natural thing doesn't come for them. So it's just like how they would use a stick to take a ball from under the bed. They are using your hand to do the things. So again, for children with language delay, if it's only a language delay, this is not how they do. They have other gestures. They will show no, they will show
Yeah.
or if they want something, they will say come, they will show eat, they will show I am hungry, all kinds of natural gestures. Like even if you look at me now, I am using my hands a lot while speaking. So that kind of natural gestures are there for children who have only language delay. It is when these are lacking, in addition to the social issues, that we consider whether the child has an autism spectrum
So
disorder.
this also is a red flag, right?
Yes, yes, that is also definitely a red flag. The absence of gesture. So it's not just pointing; it is also the various other gestures that come along with it that a normal or other children have during their conversation and play.
So
And also imaginative play actually comes more by around 2.5 years of age, where they again, it is not that children with autism do not have imagination. Many of them do have imagination and do imagine a lot of things, but because they have a different view, different way of looking at things. But if they are playing something, if they're having an imaginative play, this is for slightly older children, they will not be able to incorporate someone else's ideas into the play or play with someone else. Now, for example, if I'm playing with a child and I'm drinking from a cup, I give it to the child. He also drinks from the cup and gives it back to me. And then I say, oh, it is hot, it is hot. So then I do that. And that kind of that imitation, or the fact that, oh, it is hot, I need to do something more to it. So that kind of joining in the imaginary play is or I give a suggestion that oh, the baby is thirsty, will you please give them also, and they are able to incorporate it into that imaginative play. That incorporation is also is not or other children with autism do have that difficulty.
So, Dr. Suzette, why are sensory issues? Generally, we used to know that, okay, this child has autism, this child has high sensory issues and all. So, why sensory issues are often associated with autism?
Okay. Uh, the question why is something that is very difficult to understand, and I don't even think we really have an idea why. Now, if you look at what exactly autism is, we know that it is just a different wiring in the brain. Okay, there are if we look at the scans from various people with autism, without autism, we see that there are differences in the connectivity in the brain. So now okay, let me try and explain sensory issues as simple as I can. At every point in time, our body, our brain is unconsciously getting signals from all our sense organs. Right. So now I'm sitting here talking to you. I am mostly listening to you, but in the meanwhile, I can also hear my fan that is there in the background. My body unknowingly adjusts its posture depending on the input I am getting. So I can see things in the background. So there are lots of input that my brain is constantly getting from all my various sense organs. Okay, and this is all happening in the background. Okay, and the brain is processing them. It's trying to figure out what has to do with it and all that. So in children with sensory issues, or rather as part of autism, many, if you look at the accounts of many adults with autism, they say that sensory issues is the biggest problem, and all the repetitive behavior, all the rigidity and anxiety and all comes from the underlying sensory issues. So what exactly is the sensory issues is that, like I said, the brain is continually getting all these impulses, inputs and all that, and there is a minimum level that the brain needs so that it is able to work efficiently, or rather do things and process other things that are of importance efficiently. So that minimum level is what we usually call the threshold. Okay, so if that threshold is so depending on the threshold is where you have your sensory issues. Okay. So for some children, the threshold is like very low than what is there in the surrounding. Like again, for children who have a problem with auditory problems like the mixie, pressure cooker and things like that, their auditory threshold is very low. So even that little amount of sound that they get puts them into a distressed state because it is way above the threshold that they need for balance. Okay, so they will try and avoid these kind of sounds. So then they go into an avoidant behavior. Whereas some children you will see are running all over the place. They cannot sit anywhere. They are just jumping all the time. So they are walking on toes. They are climbing on top of everything. So these children seek the movement. That is because the threshold for balance, like the vestibular system or the proprioceptive system, the threshold of that is very high. Okay. And they are not getting that from their environment. So because of that, they keep doing all this so that they can reach the threshold and their brain is at equilibrium. And then they can do things. So we see the children who have a lot of these sensory issues. Once you address the sensory issues, they are able to pay attention better. They are able to focus on learning the skills needed. Again, if you look at it, the social kind of reciprocity that I'm talking about, that it is innate definitely, but it is also something that it's learned, in the sense that you learn that this is how you talk, this is how you do this, your parents won't like it, you do this, your parents like it. So all that kind of natural learning that is happening, it is difficult for the brain to process and understand all that when it is so
What the other
overwrought
person
with
is
all
liking or
these,
not liking.
yeah, with all these
You cannot
sensory.
understand. Yeah.
Yeah. So that is in very simple terms what the sensory issues are. And once we kind of address these, that is what most occupational therapists do with sensory integration. Now, this doesn't mean that you're able to change the threshold. Many times you can't change the threshold of it persists. But what happens is that we, like for those who are seeking behavior, we try and incorporate various activities and various things into the daily routine so that they get that level of input that they need. For those who have problems with hypersensitivity in that where the threshold is less, that we kind of somehow try and modulate it, because the brain does have that ability to become used to things. So we try and expose more and more of it gradually so that they are able to again calm themselves down in certain situations when the threshold is exceeded. I hope I am making sense and that it is not too complicated.
No, generally this is the way. So I just want to know that as we have discussed about red flags, which parents should be aware of. So is there any specific age where we generally the kids will be diagnosed as yes, the kid has autism?
Okay. So earlier we used to say that a child cannot be diagnosed with autism until and unless they cross 3 years of age.
3 years.
But that is not what it is now. We
Yeah.
can diagnose autism as young as 2, sometimes even younger, depending on the various features that the child present with. But again, like I said, risk factors or the early signs can be seen as early as 6 months of age. Doesn't mean that we will jump ahead to a diagnosis of autism, but we will again, my viewpoint on this is quite different. It is just that more, at least, yeah, we are now getting a few concessions and all once we have a diagnosis of autism. But it is unlike the West, where therapies are subsidized by the government. There are lots of advantages to having a proper diagnosis. So my view or my way of looking at things is that we find out what are the areas of difficulties that the child has and focus more on it. But objectively, a diagnosis of autism can be made with children as young as 2 years of age.
Okay. Okay. So 2 years. So before 2 years, there are red flags which the parents need to know, and then they can consult a developmental pediatrician for like proper diagnosis, right?
Yes.
So we have heard a lot of things, Dr. Susan, like might be autism is associated with genetically or something like that. So
Yeah.
how often is autism connected genetically?
So, autism is predominantly a genetic disorder. Now, genetic doesn't mean that it is hereditary. It just means that there is a lot of, or something is going wrong in the genes. Okay. And obviously, there is a lot of environmental input also in this. So, there is a term that is now coming on that is called epigenetics. Okay.
Okay.
So, what epigenetics
What
is
is
that
yeah.
how the environment influences the gene. Now, for example, let us put, okay, what do we say? Like switching on a light, for example. Okay. If the bulb is fused,
Yeah.
that is a gene problem. That light is not going to work.
Work. Yeah.
Okay. But if the connectivity to the bulb is a problem, okay, so that is what we call epigenetics. So it is not necessary that the gene or the bulb itself be fused. The factors that cause the gene to be switched on or switched off. So that is something, all genes are not automatically turned on or automatically turned off. Okay. So there are various factors that kind of affect the turning on and off of genes. Now, if you're taking medically, if you're looking at lung cancer, you may be having the genetic predisposition to lung cancer. That doesn't mean that everyone who has a genetic predisposition to lung cancer is going to get lung cancer. You understand? If in addition to that you are smoking or you are or working with or doing high risk behavior that causes the gene for lung cancer to be switched on, you end up having lung cancer. So it's like, again, looking at it very simplified terms. So we have a lot of genes have been analyzed over the past so many years by many researchers. We still haven't found any one gene or any set of genes that determine autism. a few genetic disorders like Rett syndrome, tuberous sclerosis, Fragile X. So these are all genetic syndromes with which autism is associated with. Okay. Again, a common thing that I tell my parents, or rather, it's my way of understanding. I like understanding things very simple. So autism is like how we say someone has fever. Okay. You can have fever from a simple respiratory infection. You can have fever from corona, which is here, what is there now. You
Yeah.
can have fever from cancer.
Okay.
Okay, so autism also is very, very, you can have all the features of autism, but because of varying conditions, it is not always a genetic problem. It can be a metabolic problem, it can be an immune problem, it can be environmental problem. Sometimes there are lots and lots of factors that can cause finally the brain to reach its features of autism. So
Autism.
depending on what each one is how yeah. So what is the role of genetics? There is definitely a role. Is it now because I have autism, or I have a child with autism? Is my next child going to get autism?
That is the next
That
question.
is the yeah. So that is what all parents are concerned about.
Yeah.
Statistically, in the sense that if you look at studies and look at it,
Hmm.
so if you have twins, okay, the chances of autism is more in the other child, especially if they are what we say from the same egg that has come
Hmm.
twins,
Hmm. Hmm.
identical twins. Then there is around 60 to 80% chance that they are going to be autistic.
Autism.
If one is autism, the other person child is also going to have autism.
Hmm.
If they are from two different eggs, then or non-identical twins,
Hmm.
then again the chances of autism they say is between 0 to 20%. Okay,
Okay.
that is among twins. Now among siblings, if you look at it, again the chances of autism in majority of the studies show a range between 20 to 50%, but practically it is not common. Siblings with autism, meaning again, I'm not to say that it is not there. It is just that it is not common. So what we suggest to parents who are worried is that you undergo a genetic analysis, your child. Let us see if there are any known identified genes that are there.
So,
Uh,
is there any possibility, like genetically, if we will undergo the test and all, so they can predict that, okay, might be your child has autism genetically also?
10 to 20% only of people can we find a problem. Remaining 80% we don't find a problem. And it's still because the field of autism is still research is happening, still it is still not a very well understood thing.
Hmm.
You're understanding. So that is the reason why. And again, like I said, there are lots of reasons why you can have autism, or rather, lots of reasons why a person, a child, or an adult can have autism. So trying to sort out which it is
Is
still,
still going on.
yeah,
The
still
research
going
is
on,
going on.
still going on.
So, Dr. Susan, I just want to know that how autism, learning disability, dyslexia are related to, like how they are related.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
are they related, or just they might not be related, but some like there might be the diagnosis is wrong or something like that?
I wouldn't say the diagnosis is wrong. They can coexist because again, like what you must understand is that uh, we finally have only one brain and we have all connections that are happening inside the brain. Okay. And
Hmm.
dyslexia also, it's a problem with the connectivity of the brain where they have difficulty in matching sounds with the words. Okay. So that kind of a matching problem, or rather in the sense that if the sound of R is R, so RAT, if they hear the sound rat, it should start with R. So that kind of a understanding problem is what is the basis of dyslexia. Uh, it is not actually very common, or maybe I wouldn't say that way. It can coexist. ADHD, sorry, autism and dyslexia can definitely coexist. But we also see a lot of children with autism who are hyperlexic.
Yeah.
Hyperlexic in the sense that they start reading very early.
Hmm.
They start and they have fascination for alphabets.
Hmm.
They may read, but they may not understand because comprehension is a different thing entirely. But reading, so dyslexia is a problem with reading mostly. Okay, so when we look at that, though, yes, it is linked, there is associations, but not every child with autism has a learning disability or a dyslexia. So
Okay,
it can coexist. It's, I think
can
the
coexist.
incidence is around 50 to 70%, if I'm not mistaken. That children with, again, dyslexia is a problem again because of the language. So that is also, since that is also a problem in autism, understanding language, they can have coexistent dyslexia.
Yeah, so here another thing I just want to add, Dr. Susan, that we have heard about ADHD, attention deficit hyperactive syndrome.
Yes.
So how it is also associated with how it is different to autism, or it is associated with autism, what exactly it is?
Okay. So autism again very rarely comes by itself, in the sense that,
Okay.
again, because I said it is a neurodevelopmental problem that is that is because of the way different circuitry in the brain. So ADHD is something that is seen in around 70 to 80% of children with autism. Basically, it is where they have difficulty in sustaining attention for something. It is where they can be hyperactive or impulsive. Now, again, looking at the underlying cause, why it can be it can be associated, is because the underlying thing a lot of the time is mostly sensory issues, if you would look at it. Okay. Now, it is easier for us as doctors to separate them, or rather to say that this child has autism with ADHD, so that we kind of know what the entire spectrum is. That, okay, this child has problems of autism, but he also has problems of paying attention. He also has problems of hyperactivity. So it is easier for us to get a whole picture of the child when we say autism with ADHD. These are not, uh, what shall I say? It doesn't mean that the child has, what do you say, two
Both
disorders.
the things,
Just
both
be
like
just
autism
be
and
a spectrum of the whole thing. So if you look at it, even many children with ADHD do exhibit a lot of autistic features initially,
hmm.
but the socialization is where the differentiation comes, because children with ADHD, they continue to socialize normally. They have, that is, if they have isolated ADHD, they have normal social reciprocity, they have normal gestures, normal play pattern, but they are very chaotic, or they can't concentrate or anything. They quickly shift from one activity to another and all that. Whereas children with autism, that is where their predominant difficulty is in the social interaction, in the social interaction domain. All the other features, like the repetitive movements, can maybe there in ADHD, because that is how the repetitive running around, repetitive jumping around, and all that is again them trying to come to terms with their sensory issues. So this is the main difference between autism and ADHD. That the socialization part of it, you can have both. It is just, it is kind of, it is like the extension of the spectrum. That is all.
One parent is asking here, Dr. Susan, that
Yeah.
her son had it's CP child,
Hmm.
and he is very hyperactive. So, will it be possible that he has autism also?
So again, the first and foremost criteria is a social interaction. Okay. So CP means that there's predominantly a motor problem. Okay, so children with cerebral palsy can have problems with regard to their movements and regard to their motor system. But if they have intellectual disability also, their socialization skills may be lesser than their peers, but it is still there. It is not that it is not there. Okay, so if their socialization skills are appropriate for their mental age, that is what we say. So if we have a 5-year-old child who is has a mental age of say 2 years,
Hmm.
and he is behaving like how any other 2-year-old child would. So a 5-year-old child, you expect to be able to sit down when asked questions, to be responding correctly, and all that is what you expect in a 5-year-old child. But a 2-year-old child, that is not what you expect. Okay, so if his her socialization skills are appropriate for the mental age, then the child doesn't have autism.
Doesn't have
It's
autism.
just ADHD then.
So here, I just want to add something, Dr. Susan, that how can we detect if there are any comorbid conditions which are associated with the kids who are having autism?
Okay. So what are the most common comorbid conditions?
Yeah.
So the
What are
most common,
generally the comorbid
yeah,
conditions?
general comorbid conditions. So the most common comorbid condition is ADHD, sleep
Okay.
disorders. That is very problem. So the sleep issues, again, to call it a disorder, you should have a structure in place where the child has, or rather has a correct bedtime, has a sleep routine and all that. And
Hmm.
even after that, if the sleep issues persist, is when we call it a sleep disorder. Okay.
Hmm.
Similarly with ADHD also, all kind of environmental modifications and all are done to be able to give in that sensory input and everything. And even after that, if there is a
If,
problem, that is when we call it a disorder. Okay, so that is one thing that parents need to understand. Not just any child who is running around has ADHD.
hmm.
Okay, then the other things that common comorbidities are, we see medically wise, when you look at it, children GI issues is the most common medical disorder that they have. They
Okay.
can have seizures. Seizures can be seen in around 30% of children
Okay. So this
with
is what
autism.
I was about to put it like how prevalent is seizure with autism
Yeah.
there?
So seizures is seen studies wise, they say around 30% of children have seizures.
Okay.
Okay, so this is outwardly seizures. Children with, if you take an EEG and all, the EEG abnormalities may be seen in as much as around 50 to 60%, but it doesn't necessarily mean that the child is having seizures.
Hmm.
Okay, so the problem with seizures is that many times seizures can be mistaken for certain types of autistic behavior. Like, for example, you have this particular type of seizure that is called absence seizure. So in
Absolutely.
absence seizure, they will just for some time just stare
Fade
off
it.
into something,
Hmm.
and they may just appear to be inattentive.
Hmm.
But even in that also, generally it is associated with some automatisms, is what we call, where they will be moving their lips repeatedly, or pinching their fingers repeatedly. It'll be a little bit of some other thing that is happening during that time. And then they come back and then continue whatever they were doing before as if nothing happened. Usually these are very brief. It lasts for around 30 to 30 seconds or so,
That is it.
30 seconds to 1 minute maximum.
So
So
how we will come to know that okay, this is an absence seizure?
that is mostly you, when parents, they need to observe, and then if they have a doubt, definitely need to take to a neurologist. The EEG has very characteristic features for an absence seizure. So once an EEG is done, you will know for sure whether it's an absence seizure or not.
Okay.
And again, this characteristic features will be there in the sense that they'll be doing something even in things that they are interested in. They'll be doing things something very interestedly, and then suddenly they will just like stop. And some, again, like I said, some people may chew on their mouth, or make that smacking kind of noise, or there's some outward change will be there. And then after that, 30 to 60 seconds later, they resume doing whatever it is that they did. So this is when you need to suspect an absence seizure.
So is absence seizure is like dangerous or is it?
Okay, any kind of seizure is needs to be treated in children with autism, because again, any seizure does affect your brain networking and the brain connectivity and all that. So if you doubt, or if you are suspecting, if you see this kind of behavior, it is always better to make sure that we are not missing a seizure,
Okay.
especially in children who
So is it like many kids they cry a lot?
can't.
So is crying is also like meltdown type? Is it also linked with seizure or anything?
Not really. But again, if we can't actually, so this is where again your ABC analysis help of behavior to see whether that is a common technique that we use in ABA, right?
Yeah.
So to try and see whether there is anything that we can see as a precipitator. And if there is, then it is very unlikely. But if there isn't, it is always worthwhile to get it checked.
Hmm.
Another thing is that always remember that just because your child has autism doesn't mean that every behavior is autism.
Hmm.
Okay,
Hmm.
so do look out for, and parents are the best people to look out for it. Like Recently I had a child who was new onset, in the sense it wasn't there before, new onset biting of everything, hitting himself in the mouth and head and everything. Okay.
Hmm. Hmm.
So the parents kept thinking it was a sensory issue, it was a behavioral issue and things like that. But what actually happened was that the child had a bad tooth
Okay.
and had pus in the tooth. Okay. So they, because they can't express, they will show it out in their behavior. So
Yeah.
always when there is a change from the routine behavior, be parents, yeah, in addition to everything that you have to do, you have to be like detectives to be able to see, okay, why is this? What can be the reason? So there are so many, just because again, your child doesn't, child has autism doesn't mean that he's not going to have stomach pain. He is
Hmm.
not going to have tooth problems. It doesn't mean that he's going to have a leg pain or some other reasons why. So
Yeah. They, so
do
parents
keep
need
that.
to understand. Yeah.
Yes.
Keep. Yeah.
Not everything is related to autism always.
Autism. So, like, if the child has a seizure, or if, uh, like, he got diagnosed as having some prevalent seizure, so what are the basic medications which the parents need to follow? Like, is there any therapies or anything, or they should take the medication only?
If the child has seizures, medication.
Right.
Definitely medication. Therapies do not really help in
And
controlling seizures. Okay, need to be medications. I know of people who have, because they're scared of taking allopathic medications, go to alternative systems of medication, and they have like really worsened because the seizures have just continued and it hasn't really subsided. So, depending on the type of seizure, there are various medicines that are given, and yeah, so definitely medication. While the seizure is happening, or rather during that time till the seizures are controlled, I would actually recommend not to go for any particularly occupational therapy. Okay, because the
okay.
risk of injury is higher, and when they're doing a lot of, if they happen to have a seizure in between the session, so get the seizures controlled. That is definitely what I would suggest. We'll get the seizures controlled and continue. You can do the home-based things at home because it is under your control, but definitely not in any therapy center. We'll need to get the
So,
seizures
what are
controlled
the
as quickly as
basic
possible.
triggers of seizures which the parents need to know? If the child had seizure during night, or somewhere like when the parents were not available, so how they will come to know?
That is, it, see again, triggers of seizures are very difficult to know. Some children, it is certain lights can trigger seizures.
Okay.
Decreased sleep can trigger seizures.
Okay.
Okay, so if the child has been like excessively active during the day or has difficulty going to sleep, or for some reason has had a poor sleep pattern because the child has a stomach pain or child is having loose stools or something. So child's sleep hasn't been right. That is a well-known trigger for seizure. Then these are the two main things that we say: sleeplessness and certain lights of fast changing. We say strobe lights. Fast changing lights are something that can trigger a seizure. Some children, especially if they have a metabolic issue associated with it, being on a fasting for any reason can
Okay.
trigger seizures. Okay, but
Oh,
again, this is for these very small subgroup of children that have these metabolic issues, not for everyone. So, yeah. So I
thank
would.
you so much, Dr. Susan, for the wonderful interaction. Any advices you want to give to parents so that
Yeah. So one thing that I have, I now that I have a platform like this, I would like to say is that always remember to enjoy your child.
yeah, that's true.
Okay. The reason I'm saying that again is I see a lot of parents who are bogged down with therapies from morning till night, and they have no fun time with their child. Okay. Your child wants to interact, but has difficulty knowing how to.
Mm.
Okay. And sitting them, making them sit all the time, doing repeated therapy without there being any fun is not going to make the child want to interact also.
Mm.
You understand it, because life is so boring then.
Yeah.
Okay. So please enjoy your children, have fun with them, have silly games with them. It is not, that is what if in people, I don't know whether people are taught this in therapy, but when you learn, or rather when you, how do you develop speech? Okay, speech or communication is actually like a pyramid. Okay, so until and unless, or rather, you need the bottom levels to be able to develop speech, which is at the topmost part of it. Again, doesn't necessarily mean speech, it can say also communication, of which the most important tier or most important layer is interaction.
Interaction. Yeah.
Interaction, then comes listening, or the child is paying attention, then comes understanding, and then you have speech and communication. So interaction is very, very, very important. Don't the joy, I know it is difficult as parents, to be able to find joy in the small things, but it's not just in achievements. Even in the child, hug your child often, until and unless they are aversive to hugs. Give your child lots of kisses. Let there be a lot of affection shown and fun shown. Throw water, throw sand, throw that little kind of fun. So this is one thing that I am realizing, that parents don't know how to have fun with their children.
Yeah.
So that is the one point this is apart for me being a doctor and all that. As a person who sees children with autism and families, see that the joy of having a child itself has gone away. That should not be the case. You should
Yeah, because
play.
children grows very fast.
Yeah, they grow very fast, and
You need
before
to
you know,
preserve these memories.
yes, definitely need to preserve these memories. So to all the young parents out there, that is what I say. Just have fun, laugh a lot, play with your child, have all sorts of mischief games also. Doesn't matter. That is one take
So,
home.
Dr. Susan, if you are comfortable, can you say something about yours or your sister, your sibling?
Yeah, so I have a younger sister with autism. She is now 34 years old. And she is, so she, obviously at that time, I am very thankful that my parents even managed to get a diagnosis of autism, because awareness was very less. And she was someone who was actually very, very severe autism. I am just, I think, 1.5 years older than her. So my memory of things is not very clear what the initial stages were. But from what I have heard my parents say, I know that it was quite severe. Now looking
Right.
back, and from what I remember of her meltdowns and all the various behavioral issues that she had, that it was really, really very severe.
Hmm.
And so then. What that point in time, there weren't many of these therapy centers also where you could just take your child.
Yeah.
So my mother had actually spent 2 summers. So this was 3 months at a time
Hmm.
in CMC. They under in the psychiatry department, they have this 3-month training thing for parents.
Hmm.
So that was predominantly using ABA at that time. It was called Lovas's method at that time. So using ABA was what was done for her to start understanding and her to start thing and all. And then after that also, my parents did visit a lot of centers to get ideas as to what to do at home. But primarily it was entirely home based. And thankfully we found a good school that was an inclusive school where she could go. So she went only to a normal school. She didn't go to any special school.
Okay.
So the advantage I think that she had is she had an elder sister and a younger sister.
Hmm.
So there were two people, one person to whom she could look up and see what needs to be done, in the sense that to imitate. That is one good thing of children with autism having siblings, because there is someone to that is approximately to their age group that they can interact with and imitate with. And also her going to an inclusive school that time helped a lot, because again she was seeing a lot of other children and learning from them once she had started developing imitation skills.
Hmm.
Her comorbidities, if I am looking at it now objectively, I would say sleep definitely was an issue for her initially. Uh, Initially, her EEG definitely showed a lot of abnormalities. though I'm not really sure whether she had a clinical seizure per se, but it had shown a lot of abnormalities, and for that she needed to be on medications. Then definitely anxiety. Yeah, so that is the other thing that is very common in children and adults with autism. Anxiety is a very important coexisting comorbidity that is there. So that is something that she has, and yeah. So now she is she actually she could not. Uh, she did her diploma in arts and diploma in home
Very
science,
nice. It's very nice.
and she is now married. We thankfully we found, or rather God provided for us. We are big believers in God, so God provided for us the right person who is able to understand her, and she now has a beautiful little kid, a 1.5-year-old child.
You have shared
And
a hope to many parents. Like,
yeah.
yeah, so many parents, you have shared the hope that, yeah, nothing can stop autism.
Yes, obviously. So she actually was working when I was in Vellore doing my
Okay.
PG. She was staying with me, and there was a school there for the staff kids,
Okay.
and so she was there. She likes children a lot, so she was there, and she would like, since she is an artist, she would like make the workbooks for them and teach the children phonetics is something that she really likes, so she was found to be good at that also by the teacher there. So like a teacher assistant, she used to work there, and she is, yeah, she is mostly independent. Having a child, definitely there are challenges, because, and it's predominantly again anxiety, because she is not able to understand or figure out what is it that the child needs or what to do when something happens, because it is difficult for her to, it's not that she doesn't empathize or has, but like for
It's
example, if the child, yeah, it is
it
difficult
is,
for any
yeah,
normal parent itself, so
yeah,
having a special set of challenges
yeah,
makes it even more difficult.
yeah.
So
So thank you so much, Dr. Susan, for sharing your journey and throwing lights of hope to other parents also, and sharing a lot of things like the parents should know about autism. And regarding to autism and the comorbid conditions and what is autism and all, thank you so much for being here.
thank you, Monisha, for having me. It has definitely been a pleasure.